we really focus on a pragmatic approach. So what do we mean by that? It's you know, as you probably saw in that last slide, I mean, there's a lot to this, and you really, it is rare or near impossible that people can like set out and just knock all that out, you know, at the same time and you know, across their whole organization, set up a framework for data governance and implement all that content across all their systems and all their areas. So how do you sort of set yourself up for success when you've got such a big endeavor and an important endeavor to do? So that's really about, you know, thinking about a pragmatic approach. So there's really these 6 main areas. The first is to have clear goals, to create a pragmatic and prioritized roadmap to accomplish those goals, to build buy-in for the goals and for your roadmap across your organization. Then once you've done that, as part of the roadmap is reaching what we call a minimum content tipping point, to have enough content in your repository and in the system that you know, people's first experience with it isn't going to be you know, a blank piece of paper or being asked to write stuff. So that's a sort of a job of the key stakeholders to get that initial content in there. We'll talk about that. Having just-in-time processes, which we already discussed about creating, that you don't need. The important point about this is that we're not saying, and we're actually telling you in some way saying not to do this, is to create, is that you have to have everything documented to start. You don't. You need a minimum content, set of content, and then processes to create more content as it's needed, right? And that's much more successful than sort of waiting around. We'll talk about that. And then this is really important, having champions, right? So any types of these initiatives or any other sort of major initiatives, you can compare this to like implementing a help desk system or in your organization or other kind of major initiatives that you do. It's really helpful to have champions to you know, help train and promote and motivate people to continue to use it and use it appropriately and monitor that. So there's your sort of set of goals. So let's a set of key elements to success. So we'll go a little bit deeper into each one of these. So let's start about goals. So the best practices of data governance and data intelligence are means to an end, right? So it's not, you know, I always worry when someone says, you know, what are your goals? And our goals is to create a business glossary, or our goal is to create a data request process. And that's a means, right? The end is that, you know, we've got confusion around the data and we want to create more trust and understanding and utilization of the information within our organization. And we believe that one of the ways to do that is to create a business glossary to provide more context to the people who are using our data, right? So the goal is to create more trust and use and actionable data-driven culture within your organization. And the means then is to have a business glossary or one of these other things. So identifying the goals, which are often defined by aspirational things that you want to do better, but also some of the things that are stopping you, you know, to get beyond, you know, this issue or that issue. But your goals also might be set by, you know, we want to satisfy the auditor who told us we need to do this. And that's perfectly fine if that's why you're doing it and you're understanding why you're doing it. And that actually might change how and what you do if your goal is to satisfy an auditor instead of to actually, you know, create more trust and you know, in your report consumers or whatever. So I could spend a whole hour on this because this is, again, the single most important thing to drive buy-in and to make sure that you stick to it is to understand why you're doing it. Second thing I would recommend is that people don't usually think about it this way, but I really think it's important, is to approach the concept of data intelligence as customer service. So that customers, in this case, are basically anyone within your organization who's going to interact with the data. So it could be both the people requesting and consuming reports and data. It could be the report writers and the technical people working with the data and generating responses to them. And it could be the data stewards and subject matter expertise experts that are helping people understand the data. All those people are sort of customers for your data governance process. And again, a good corollary to this is to think about a help desk system. That the help desk is really helping people better use your data better. And that really helps frame the why too, right? To understand that you're doing this as a customer service activity. All right, so that's setting your goals and defining your goals. Then once you have your goals, to create a pragmatic and prioritized roadmap. So, from a pragmatic standpoint, you see this person looking at the glass and saying, oh, great, it's half full. And this person looking at the glass and saying, oh, no, it's half empty. And the pragmatist is drinking the glass, right? He's like, I didn't even stop to think about it, whatever. I'm gonna go for it. And that's really what we want you to do too, because you can get real paralysis and failure to launch and momentum freezing in data governance is very common. So having an approach that where you can just sort of take action and move forward, and as I've one of my favorite quotes is continuous improvement over postponed perfection is a really important thing to tackle. So the first thing that you want to do here is to, in order to do that, is to build a good roadmap. Now, I don't want to contradict myself and say, first you need to create this big plan, but it is important to have a plan that sets yourself up for success, a pragmatic plan, right? I really don't propose like spending a year coming up with some sort of charter or whatever, but really thinking about a plan. So a real practical way to do this is just decide who your sort of champions are, who you're going to do this. Do a relatively quick assessment of your current data governance environment and the tools, and then from that, the goals that you have, from that create some recommendations for how to tackle those goals, and then prioritize and scope them, and then build this roadmap plan, and then some sort of actionable pilot to project to apply these things to, and then measure the success. So really the goal is to come up with this roadmap here in this approach. So what is included in that roadmap? So the goals that we just discussed before, the set of best practices that you're going to implement across content and processes. So, we've decided that we want to do a business glossary and a data system inventory, or we're going to do a data quality issue tracking system, or a reference data management process, and all the things that you're going to do and the process you're going to implement. And then there's sort of a schedule to do that. We're going to do this first, and then that second, and this third. And then a rollout plan for each best practice where you say, this is the important thing to understand, is that it's not just that you're going to say, hey, we'll do business glossary first, and then we'll do a data request process, or we'll do these three things at the same time. But you might say, we're going to do a business glossary, but we're going to start with our human resources team, and then we're going to go to our sales team, and then we're going to go to, because you really want to make sure that you've got people who are bought in and willing to participate, and it really depends on your culture and again, what your goals are to how you want to do that and prioritize it. And I highly recommend also having some sort of immediate pilot and implementation document. So as part of this saying, hey, we're going to do this, but this is the plan, and we're going to start off with this. So the types of things that might apply to is, hey, we bought a new reporting tool, or we have a new regulatory report, a set of regulatory reports that are going out, or we're implementing this new CRM, because those things are really good things to start off and apply a bunch of this data governance to, because you got to touch a lot of data and build a lot of things, and it's a good place to start. So that's the high level kind of stuff that you want. You probably just want to do this though in like a couple pages, 2 to 3 pages of what the goals are and the set of best practices you're implementing. Then following that, you'll do a write-up of sort of the current state assessment, a little bit about the tools and environment that you know about, the systems, what reporting tools, what resources you already have in terms of data governance structure or people, processes and content that may already exist, and then any of the major identified issues or themes that you're trying to solve for. And that's just helpful to help justify the buy-in and the recommendations, is to have a little bit of this documented as well. And then for each one of the best practices, maybe a page or two on how you plan to implement that. Right, so that's the roadmap goal. But the main reasons we want to create the roadmap is, as we mentioned, that data governance is very broadly defined and not well understood. So you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with what you're doing and what you're doing first and second and third. It's also that it does require people to contribute work and time, and so you need to have them buy in and understand the reasons why and see it in the roadmap, and they don't feel like they're just wasting their time and doing work for nothing. And then lastly, it's just very difficult to tackle all the areas of data governance at once. So the plan has to be sort of feasible, play to your organization's strength, match you're prioritizing things based on feasibility, where your strengths are, that it matches your goals, and that and then you have sort of future priorities communicated out for people who know, oh, well, I really wanted that done, and it's not being done now. They know, oh, well, that's going to happen later, and helps with the buy-in there. So you sort of start small and grow into it. So that's the whole purpose of the roadmap, is to set yourself up for success. Prioritizing, again, you want to think about the prioritization. It's not, what are you going to do in terms of setting up your framework? What content do you want to try to tackle, and in what sequence? Within that, what organizational scope, like finance and enrollment or other areas? Which data systems and tools maybe are you going to focus on, and who are the stakeholder groups? And again, one of the things you can really set yourself up to for failure is to prioritize something that you want to do early where you don't have the stakeholders available or bought in yet. So okay, so that we spent a lot of time on that. It's an important topic. So now that you've got that roadmap built, you want to get the buy-in for these goals and roadmap. So it's not just a document that you're going to take and put on a shelf, but you want to take that and share that with your leadership, with the stewards you're going to have to participate, the consumers and requesters. So the information from that, what you're trying to do, understanding the goals, understanding the roadmap, to get buy-in from them. And it's helpful maybe if you can figure out how to to be able to communicate why people should participate. And then if you can, figure out how you can measure the results and say, this is what we want to be able to accomplish in terms of the actionable results. Not that, hey, we're going to have 500 terms in our business glossary, but our average data request for a new report will drop to 5 days or something. Those kinds of goals would be much more useful. So the other area we have for the success, once you've got this plan, you've got some buy-in, is to get a tipping point in content. So whatever content you've decided that you're going to start off with, it's good to seed with a certain amount of information. You don't have to have the perfect amount. A good example for this is Wikipedia. So the vast majority of people who go to Wikipedia are going there to get answers to questions, right? That started off with some key active users, who got very excited about it, and stakeholders who imported and created enough initial content that people started getting interested, and not only in getting the answers, but also then in authoring their own stuff, right? They had some good examples and all that kind of stuff. So an interesting little chart here is if you look at the beginning of Wikipedia, going up through here, it was kind of creeping along till it got to 1,000 articles in sort of 2006 and around 1,500 in 2007. At this time, you had your sort of heavy users who were doing 100+ edits, and this sort of stayed fairly common, but they were doing a fair amount of work here, and then people who are doing 25+ edits, and then there's some more casual people who are interacting and doing sort of 5+ edits in the system. Now, we're not counting viewers, but people who are participating and continuing to build it. It wasn't until we hit this sort of tipping point of enough content that the casual users really sort of skyrocketed, right, to use it. So that's really what you want to do here too. Just get enough content there that, not that it answers every question, but that people know that if they go there and they want something, that they can author it themselves, or they can request it and something else can get authored. And it just feels like a place that's growing and active and has good content and models. All right. But as I said, you don't have to do everything at once. If you don't have to do everything before you start. If you have enough content that there's good examples and at least a chance of finding something. But if not, then people can request new curated objects, having a points of entry for just-in-time processing. So kind of a common method of doing data governance, which is the opposite of this, is by committee. So you're going to have we have 24 data stewards across our whole organization, and we're going to meet every 2 weeks for 2.5 hours, and we're going to discuss data definitions. And we've got a list of 1,000 definitions we're going to go through. All right. Well, okay, that's incredibly inefficient. It's a lot of like 22 people sitting around watching 2 people argue for an hour. But also, like, those 1,000 definitions, how do you know those are the ones that people even want, right? So, it's a better approach to say, hey, we have some key definitions and some key content that we want to start to get to that tipping point, and then we're going to worry about continuing as new things are created to get documented. Document the new things, but if someone comes along with a question about something that's not yet documented, we'll have a process to make that, to document at that point in time. And we don't have to wait until everything's documented to get that released. This method sort of oftentimes will lead to, at best, like a binder on a shelf that nobody ever looks at, that's maybe incomplete, it's not 100% accurate. But the concept of having the just-in-time data intelligence where you give users access to the information to search and see what they can find when they need it. If they don't find it, there's points of entry for them to request information or report problems, and that will sort of immediately involve data stewards and get new content created as needed and return a response. So new knowledge about your data is created with each request or each sort of process to capture the data intelligence as it's being created or as it's needed. So that's the concept there. So rather than sort of focusing on a project to document this stuff, you need to it's better to have processes where there's points of entry to make sure that you can get a response to someone quickly. And that's the same thing with the help desk system. This is what, going back to that like customer service standpoint, is that you might start off and you want to make sure that you have a frequently asked questions area or a set of responses or documented process for how people do things. But that's going to be the things that you kind of know about, or some high frequency questions that you get before. But the purpose of a help desk system is to route and deal with questions that where there's confusion or something new or whatever. So if someone comes along and they don't see the FAQ, or the FAQ doesn't make sense, or they can't find a response, there's a way for them to submit their problem. Well, I can't log into my laptop and blah, 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 blah. And that gets routed to the right person. They then help them finish the response. And then they might add a new thing to the knowledge base around how that happens. It's the same thing can happen here with data intelligence as well, if you want. So avoid this project versus process trap. All right, lastly, champions. So, if having those champions who can do ongoing training and buy-in activities, lunch and learns, webinars, train the trainers, working with stewards, also sort of measure and report on success to the high level, towards those high level goals to your leadership and other folks, create metrics and reward, bribe people with cookies and lunch or gift certificates or whatever, organize data governance web pages and documentation. So just whatever to keep things interested and keep things moving and continue to have buy-in and review is super important.